Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless Official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The day begins like any other, but in Genoa City, normalcy rarely survives past breakfast, and today, the truth detonates like a bomb. Matt arrested. Those two words race across town before anyone has time to process the horror behind them. Because this isn't just another police call or another dirty secret exposed, this is darker, bigger, and far more disturbing than anything Nick Newman ever imagined possible. It starts with a frantic neighbor's call about strange noises coming from Matt Clark's property, a place already wrapped in suspicion, unease, and whispers Nick had ignored for far too long. The police arrive expecting a domestic disturbance or maybe a break-in, but what they find is so shocking that even seasoned officers freeze in their tracks. A hidden basement, one Matt never mentioned, never allowed anyone to enter, a place he kept locked behind a steel door no one had reason to question, houses a horrifying scene straight out of a nightmare. One body lies on the cold concrete, lifeless, broken, and already beginning to fade into the stillness around it. Next to it, barely clinging to life, another victim struggles for breath, bruised, bloodied, and suffering from injuries that tell a story of desperation and terror. The paramedics fight to stabilize the injured survivor, working in frantic bursts of urgency while officers shout updates into their radios. Meanwhile, Matt Clark stands handcuffed on the lawn, sweat dripping down his face, panic in his eyes, swearing he didn't know and didn't put them there, but no one is listening. The officers have seen enough. They read him his rights, and the click of the cuffs might as well be a gunshot echoing across Genoa City, because everything is about to change. Matt screams for Nick. He begs for him. He insists Nick will understand, that Nick will tell the police there's been a mistake. But that belief shatters the moment a detective picks up his phone and dials Nick Newman's number. Nick answers casually, unaware his world is about to be ripped apart. When he hears the words, "Mr. Newman, you need to come down to the station." It's about Matt, something inside him goes cold. The detective hesitates, because how do you tell someone that a man they've defended, trusted, and tried to help is now at the center of a gruesome crime scene? But the truth cannot be softened. We found a body in his basement. One deceased. One critical. Nick's breath catches. His grip loosens. The phone nearly slips through his fingers as reality slams into him with brutal force. A body? In Matt's basement? It doesn't make sense. It cannot make sense. Nick feels the air leave his lungs, like someone just sucker punched him in the chest. For a moment, he hears nothing but a loud, disorienting ringing in his ears, the kind that comes when your world fractures. His knees buckle, and he collapses back into a chair, struggling to speak. The detective continues, explaining that they need Nick to answer questions, that Matt is demanding to see him, that the entire situation is spiraling at a speed no one can control. Nick can barely process the words before he forces out the only ones he can manage, "I'll be there." Driving to the station is torture. Every red light feels like an hour. Every turn feels like moving through wet cement. Nick's hands shake on the steering wheel, his mind replaying every conversation he's had with Matt, every time he looked him in the eyes and believed him. Did he miss something? Were there signs? Clues? Anything that could have warned him? Nick has always seen himself as the protector, the man who steps up when things go wrong. But this is a level of darkness he never imagined would land on his doorstep. And yet here he is, sprinting into the station like his life depends on it, because maybe it does. Maybe everything he thought he knew is about to be rewritten. Inside, chaos erupts. Reporters gather like vultures, shouting questions, flashing cameras, yelling Matt's name, yelling Nick's name, yelling for statements no one is ready to give. Officers push them back while Nick storms past the front desk, demanding answers. The detective leads him to a small room, its lights too bright, its air too stale, its atmosphere suffocating with the weight of tragedy. They begin laying out the details, how the victims were discovered, the timeline, the signs of struggle, the blood patterns, the evidence linking the crime directly to Matt's property, and worst of all, the revelation that the injured victim whispered something before being taken to the hospital. He knew we were there, he left us. Those words slice through Nick like a blade. He tries to breathe, tries to understand, but all he feels is betrayal, confusion, and a deep, paralyzing dread. Then Matt arrives. He is escorted down the hallway in cuffs, flanked by officers, his face pale, his body tense, his eyes wild with desperation. When he sees Nick standing behind the glass window, he breaks, completely. He lunges forward, screaming Nick's name, begging him to believe him, insisting he didn't kill anyone, that he didn't hurt anyone, that he's being set up, framed, tricked, targeted, anything to escape the crushing weight of what he's accused of. But Nick, standing there, watching this man he once defended being pulled deeper into a nightmare, feels his stomach twist into knots. He wants to believe Matt. He wants to help. But the pictures on the table, the bloodied floor, the hidden basement, the victim's desperate words, they tell a story that doesn't align with anything Matt is saying. The detective explains the rest. The basement showed signs of being used recently, tools out of place, restraints hidden under a tarp, and a burner phone tucked behind a vent. There are footprints. There are fingerprints. There are too many pieces of evidence for this to be a coincidence. Nick's head spins as he listens, each detail hitting him harder than the last. The longer the detective speaks, the more Nick feels something cracking inside him. He remembers the first day he offered Matt a chance to rebuild, to be better, to start over. Now, he questions everything. Was Matt ever honest? Was he ever trustworthy? Or has Nick been supporting a monster without knowing it? But the horror doesn't end there. The detective informs Nick that the surviving victim's condition is critical. They may not make it through the night. And if they die, this isn't just assault, kidnapping, or unlawful confinement. This becomes a double homicide. And Matt Clark becomes the prime suspect in a case that could shake Genoa City for years. Nick staggers out of the room, barely able to stand. He presses his back against the hallway wall, sliding down until he's sitting on the cold floor, hands over his face, fighting tears and rage and disbelief. He thinks of his family. He thinks of the people he vouched for. He thinks of the consequences he never imagined he would have to face. And worst of all, he thinks of the victims, their fear, their pain, their final moments in that hidden basement that should never have existed. When the police escort Matt past him again, Matt tries to speak, but Nick can't hear it. He can't absorb another word. All he sees is the brutal truth: someone died in Matt's basement. Someone else might die. And the man he defended is at the center of it all. Outside, the world erupts as the news breaks: Matt Clark arrested. Body found in hidden basement. Nick Newman contacted by police. The town erupts in shock, fear, outrage, and speculation. Everyone wants answers. Everyone wants to know how deep this nightmare goes. And Nick, standing there among flashing lights and swarming reporters, feels the crushing weight of guilt settle on his shoulders. This isn't over. In fact, it's only the beginning. Because as the sun sets over Genoa City, detectives uncover even more evidence in Matt's house, evidence that suggests the victims weren't the first to be inside that basement. And Nick, shaken to his core, realizes that everything he thought he knew about Matt Clark was a lie. The night stretches on with a thickness that feels suffocating, pressing against the walls of the police station like the darkness itself is alive, creeping into every corner, feeding on the panic, the confusion, and the grief swirling around the building. Nick Newman stands outside beneath the blinding flash of red and blue lights, his hands trembling, his breath uneven as he tries to make sense of the chaos that has detonated around him. He's still reeling from the shock of the initial call, the horrifying details the detective revealed, and the image of Matt Clark screaming his innocence while being dragged away in cuffs. But what he doesn't know, what he cannot imagine, is that the nightmare is far from over. The horror in Matt's basement wasn't the only thing buried. There are truths still lurking beneath the surface, waiting to rise up and crush him all over again. Inside the house, investigators continue their sweep. A forensics team methodically documents every inch of the property, their voices hushed, their faces pale as they uncover more unsettling clues. The basement wasn't the only room hiding secrets. There are scratches on a back window frame that look like someone tried to escape. There's an overturned chair in the kitchen that doesn't belong to Matt. And then, in a crawl space behind a vent in the hallway, an officer finds a shredded piece of fabric, stained with blood and dirt. It's small, torn, but unmistakably from clothing meant to fit someone much smaller than the victims found downstairs. A child-size scrap. The detectives exchange a look of absolute dread. This discovery changes everything. What they thought they were dealing with, a double victim situation, may be only a fraction of something larger, something far more twisted. While the forensics team sends the scrap of fabric to the lab for analysis, news around town spreads like wildfire. Social media explodes with speculation, rumors, and panic. People dig through Matt's history, resurrecting every shady move, every questionable decision, every moment that now suddenly looks like a clue everyone missed. Some posts accuse him of being a serial predator. Others claim he's working with someone. A few insist he's innocent and being set up. But the loudest voices, the ones shaping the conversation, are convinced he's guilty. And as Nick reads headlines being thrown around online, Monster Matt, Basement of Horrors, new evidence suggests more victims, he feels physically sick. He wants to go home, to escape the flashing lights and the cameras and the whispers, but he can't. Not yet. Not until he knows everything. Not until he understands how deep this goes. Not until he faces Matt one last time. Inside the interrogation room, Matt sits with his hands cuffed to the table, his posture stiff, his face drenched in sweat. His eyes dart around wildly, tracking every sound, every breath from the officers outside. He's unraveling. And when Nick enters the room, escorted by a detective, Matt's entire body lurches forward as he tries to stand. The cuffs yank him back into the chair. He slams into it with a painful thud, but he barely notices. "Nick," he gasps, his voice cracking. "Thank God. Thank God you came." Nick's expression is cold, colder than Matt has ever seen. "Tell me," Nick demands, his voice low and trembling with fury. "Tell me exactly what happened. No lies. No excuses." Matt shakes his head frantically, tears spilling down his face. "I didn't do it. I swear to you, Nick, I didn't kill anyone. They were just there, I didn't put them there, somebody set me up." Nick slams his hands on the table. "A body in your basement, Matt. Another barely alive. A hidden room you never told anyone about. Evidence everywhere. And you're saying you didn't know? You live there. You control every inch of that place." Matt's breathing speeds up. He looks like a trapped animal. "I didn't know," he repeats, voice breaking. "Nick, you gotta believe me, they wanted to frame me, they wanted me locked up, they." "Who?" Nick snaps. "Who wanted to frame you?" Matt hesitates. And in that hesitation, just a fraction of a second, Nick sees it. Something. A flicker. A shadow. A secret. A truth Matt is terrified to say out loud. Nick leans closer, voice shaking. "Who, Matt?" Matt's voice drops to a whisper. "If I tell you, they'll kill me." Nick recoils slightly. For a moment, he's not sure if Matt's lying or if he truly believes every word. Matt's eyes burn with desperation, fear, maybe even guilt, all tangled together so tightly that Nick can't tell where one emotion ends and another begins. But the detective running the interrogation isn't as patient. The detective slams a stack of crime scene photos on the table. "Tell us their names," he growls, "or the DA will bury you alive." Matt snaps. He screams, knocking the photos onto the floor. "I don't know their names," he wails, pulling at his hair, fighting the cuffs like they're suffocating him. "You think I'd be sitting here terrified if I knew who it was? They set me up. They set me up because they knew you'd never believe me." Nick watches him break down, and a part of him aches because some tiny sliver of the old Matt, the one he mentored, the one he tried to save, still flickers. But the other part of Nick, the protective father, brother, partner, and friend, screams inside him that this man doesn't get sympathy. Not now. Not anymore. The detective orders Nick out as Matt spirals into full hysterics. The officers restrain him, force him back into the chair, and slam the door shut, blocking Nick's view. But Nick can still hear Matt screaming long after he's been dragged from the room. Outside in the hallway, Nick absorbs the shock, while the detective begins explaining the newly discovered evidence. The blood patterns in the basement indicate the victims were held for hours, maybe days. The injuries on the surviving victim show signs of restraint. And worst of all, the lab reports come back faster than anyone expected. The tiny fabric scrap? Human blood on it. Not belonging to either victim found in the basement. That means someone else, a third possible victim, was on that property. And there's no sign that they ever left. Nick feels as though the building tilts beneath him. The ground itself is betraying him. Are you saying, he whispers, voice hoarse, that Matt might have had more? The detective's face is grim. We're not ruling anything out. Nick's stomach twists violently. He nearly retches, bracing himself against the wall as he tries to steady his breathing. How far does this nightmare go? How many lives has Matt touched? How many people suffered while Nick believed him, defended him, vouched for him? Meanwhile, as more details leak to the press, the reporters swarm the police station with renewed aggression. Shadows loom in the flashing lights. Questions fly at Nick. Did you know? Were you aware Matt was dangerous? Are you connected? Did he confess to you? The noise is overwhelming, a cacophony of judgment and accusation that makes Nick feel like he's drowning. Every camera feels like an accusation. Every shout feels like blame. When he finally escapes the mob and makes it to his truck, Nick sits behind the wheel for a long time, gripping it tightly as his mind races through every memory he has of Matt. The moments they talked. The times Matt seemed scared. The times he seemed grateful. The times he seemed off. Was there a moment where Nick could have stopped this? Could he have sensed something? Prevented something? Saved someone? As he sits there in the dark cab of his truck, his phone buzzes with messages, Victoria asking if he's okay, Sharon sending concern, Noah panicking about the rumors online, and others from family and friends. But Nick can't face any of them. Not tonight. Not when he doesn't have answers. Not when the guilt is suffocating him. Back at the crime scene, officers continue searching. In the yard, one detective finds disturbed soil behind a shed. Freshly turned, uneven, suspicious. The team begins digging. Every shovel of dirt increases tension. And when the shovel hits something solid, everyone freezes. They kneel, brushing away the dirt until a tarp emerges. A tarp big enough to hide something, or someone. Before anyone opens it, the supervising detective calls the station. Tell Newman, he says, his voice low, he needs to come back. Now. But as the call goes out, as the tarp is lifted, as the truth begins to surface, Nick is still sitting in his truck, staring straight ahead, unaware that the nightmare he thought couldn't possibly get worse, just did. And when he returns, when he sees what lies buried in Matt Clark's yard, everything he thought he knew about Matt, about the case, about the victims, about himself, will be shattered in a way he may never recover from. Nick returns to Matt's property with dread clawing at his chest, every step feeling heavier than the last. The moment he pulls up, he sees the swarm of police cars, the floodlights casting long, harsh shadows across the grass, and the detectives standing in a tight circle near the shed. Their faces are grim, too grim, and Nick feels his heart begin to pound, the rhythm sharp and painful. Whatever is under that tarp, it's worse than anything he's imagined so far. And that terrifies him. The lead detective spots Nick and approaches with an expression that tells Nick the world is about to tilt again. We found something else, the detective says quietly, voice taut. Nick swallows hard, nodding once, not trusting himself to speak. The detective gestures toward the uncovered tarp. Nick forces his feet to move. The closer he gets, the colder the air feels, like the backyard itself is rejecting him, pushing him away from whatever truth lies inside that shapeless, dirt-covered mass. The officers step aside, giving Nick a clear view. The tarp has already been peeled back halfway, revealing what's beneath. Nick's stomach drops. Inside the tarp is a shallow grave, and within it, clothing. Not a body. Not remains. But clothing, small clothing. A jacket. Jeans. A sneaker. Items that look like they belong to a young teenager. They're dirty, crumpled, stained, and disturbingly intact. Nick stares at them, confusion and terror mixing inside him like toxic smoke. What is this? He forces out. We don't know yet, the detective replies. But the size suggests these belong to someone younger than the victims found in the basement. We're running prints and DNA. We also found a bracelet tangled in the clothing. He holds up a small evidence bag. Inside is a charm bracelet, silver, delicate, clearly belonging to a young girl. Nick's breath catches. His vision blurs for a moment as he grips the edge of the shed.